What's up, guys? As you can tell, we're outside. It may be a little bit windy, but honestly the day was too pretty not to come out here and talk with you guys, so we're going to do this a little differently. Recently I've had a couple of conversations with some folks regarding what some of these class 1s do at conductor training, and that is a hang test and getting on and off rail equipment. So we're going to talk about that today, but before we begin, do me a favor, hit that like and subscribe button down below. Help get our videos out there to everyone. I really appreciate it. 83% of our viewers are non-subscribed. Again, it's free. Hit the like button on the video if you found it helpful. Also, if you want to be notified whenever we release new video and content, hit that little notification bell down there as well. Let's just start with the hang test. Hang test, from the best I've been able to find, is that they require you to hang on a ladder or a piece of rail equipment for a total of 1 minute and 30 seconds. And it is 45 seconds on each arm. So essentially, what you do is you get on this, let's just call it a ladder. You get on this ladder attached to a wall. And you climb up there and you hang in this position while giving hand signals for 45 seconds, and then you'll switch, you'll turn, hang with the other arm. Now, realistically, when you're riding rail equipment, you will never ride, if at all possible, with your shoulder parallel to the ground, your arm parallel to the ground, and hanging as far out as you can off a rail car. You just don't do that. It's not safe. And also it puts an incredible amount of strain on your forearms, your wrist, your shoulders, rotator cuff, all that. Realistically, when we ride, you hold as high up as possible, or you keep your body as close as possible to that rail car. Because even if there's not a no clearance zone or area where you're at, there can still be obstructions like trees or signs and things like that that can easily scrape you off the side of a rail car. So when you ride, realistically, you're as close as possible. Now, I understand the purpose behind the test and I actually support the test, but that's not really realistic for them to have you hanging as far out as you possibly can. Now, as far as getting on and off rail equipment, the cases that were provided to me through my conversations was that they had taken their classes out to the training yard or their mock-up facility and had them get on and off a tank car. Well, for their test, they took them out to an actual track to where there's a steep grade ballast and had them get on and off a tank car. Well, the problem is when you're trying to mount a piece of rail equipment that's has a steep grade of ballast right there, your rung, which may have been about knee level or so, can now possibly be waist high or even chest high. And that does make things exponentially more difficult. And he said that he and other students were failed out of the class when they couldn't mount that tank car because the rung was too high. I think that was kind of a bit of a dirty move, but at the same time, I'm just going to play devil's advocate. That is a very realistic move. And the reason I say this is because when you get out into the field, very rarely are things going to be in the optimal position. That includes rungs and things like that you may need to be able to get on and off that piece of rail equipment, and it gets a little awkward, so you need to be able to physically do that. Now, let's talk about the fairness of those tests. If those tests are actually being done that way, I do think it's pretty fair, and the reason I say that is because in most cases, you're not going to be riding a piece of rail equipment for 1 minute and 30 seconds. You may be riding it for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on the circumstances and things of that nature. And you need to be able to physically do the job at least at a minimum capacity of some sort. And if you can't hang on a ladder for a minute and a half, or you can't get on and off a piece of rail equipment, that tells me that you may not physically be at the minimum point of being able to do this job. And I have worked with people that were at that point. Hell, at that point, I was in the super fat category. As many of you guys know that have been around for a good while, that I got over 420 pounds. I had a horrible time, and in some cases just physically couldn't do it, of getting on and off rail equipment. And one, that's not safe being at that level. Two, it's not fair to my co-workers who now have to come pick up the slack for things that I should be able to do. And three, it's, I just open myself up to more injury trying to do something I physically can't do safely or correctly. That may be a bit of a hard pill to swallow for some, and if that's where you're at, I'm not saying that to shame anyone. That's literally just a matter of fact. Now, if weight is part of that issue, and this is a job you want to do, then take that as motivation to make the changes you need to get out there and maybe get a bit healthier and drop that weight. Part of it could be a mobility issue. If that's a case, mobility is something that can easily be worked on just from daily stretching. Nothing really required. I mean, I'm a guy, and I'm not all that flexible, and it's still a little tricky for me to get on some of these pieces in certain locations, but is what it is. You figure out how to do it, but mobility can be fixed pretty simply. As far as like the hang test, okay, that's, again, a lot of people probably don't use those muscles on a daily basis or before coming out to the railroad. You've been in something like construction, things like that, then the hang test, as far as strength-wise and muscle-wise, is not going to be an issue. And when I say muscle-wise, you don't have to be a bodybuilder to do this, but if you sat in an office job the last 5, 10, 15 years, or you're not fresh out of high school from playing sports, you're probably not going to have much along the lines of basic forearm strength or shoulder strength or stability in your rotator cuff. So something as simple as hanging on to something for 45 seconds with one arm could prove to be a challenge for you. If that's the case, get on YouTube and look at some simple exercises you can do at home, nothing fancy, to maybe strengthen yourself up a little bit. Because I promise you, the last thing you do not want to have happen being out there is riding on a piece of rail equipment and your forearms give out because you can't hang on to the ladder anymore, while you're riding a piece of equipment. That's going to make for a bad day, and nobody needs that because we all need to go home safe. So with that in mind, I'm probably going to put some things together over what I did when I started losing weight to help increase my basic strength so I could perform the job duties out here that I needed to do. And if you're one of those that are watching this that have failed that hang test or getting on and off the equipment, I encourage you, if this is a job you want to do, to continue pursuing it. Don't give up, but sitting here and saying, hey, this test is not fair, is not going to do you any favors. To me, it's a realistic test, as silly as it seems, that everybody should be able to do at the bare minimum. As far as my case, going through OJT at BNSF, we didn't have a hang test. Our instructor actually took us out to some tracks, and we spent a day getting on and off this different pieces of equipment and locomotives and things like that. And that was essentially our hang test. But our instructor did say that if we couldn't, physically get on and off these cars without killing ourselves, we weren't going to pass the class, but fortunately everybody passed that day, and that was essentially our hang test and rail equipment test. I hope this helps. Stick with it, guys, if this is something you really want to do. And just know that the test, as much as you guys may hate it and balk at it, there is, in my opinion, a level of fairness to it, and it does serve a purpose. So keep working hard, keep at it, guys. We'll see you on the next one. Here we go.